So this is just after 18:17 hours GMT in London, 6:17 p.m. on Tuesday, the 11th of May 2021. And we're going to take the promised detailed look at the latest piece of pretentious lying by Yasmin Alibai C in the I newspaper. This is Yasmin Alibai C. Now, it's a flexible option for anyone viewing this to use the C as the first of a word that they think is appropriate to call Yasmin Alibai. There is a word with 3 letters altogether. There are various words with 4 letters, including the C. Now, why we are annoyed and offended by her lying? Answer is there in the question. She lies. And her lying technique is that she ingratiates herself and kind of, in a quote, professional way, latches on, careeristic way, latches on to that part of the bandwagon that she notices is rolling at the given time. So here she has got a picture on our piece. George Floyd, that man. Now, she never has met an Asian Muslim person at all. Now, there are anything between 1.5 billion or more Muslims on the world. And this criminal has made a career out of the claim that she is a Muslim. Now, she doesn't have any duty to meet or contact any particular Muslims. But if she claims that she is a Muslim, then she has to be able to substantiate that claim by writing and thinking and speaking as a Muslim. She doesn't. She writes and her paid for items are as a parasite. She's a Muslim parasite, or she's a parasite onto the image, collective image of the Muslims in the world, and in Britain in particular. So while we have no objection to her ingratiating herself, latching on to the image, that she appreciates Shakespeare, that she appreciates George Floyd. I mean, there is nothing Muslim about any of it. And so she's a kind of female version of Uncle Tom. Even worse. And this one is her latching on to the young people. The young people is a very loose word that can be applied to anything. Young people. It's a reality. People are young. Some people are young. And everyone is young. Everyone who is an adult had been young. And so on. There is nothing unique about it, nothing unique about Shakespeare. And the fact that Shakespeare, she's saying, so that is the general introduction. Now, this is the detail of her column in her name today. The unimaginable is happening. cultural cleansing is now a central Tory project. Now, this is not now. This has always been so. For example, how many of William Radice's contemporaries can speak any of the languages, any of the hundreds of languages in the subcontinent? Hundreds. Because there are billions of people in Asia, and in the subcontinent itself there are nearly 2 billion people. How many of William Radice's contemporaries speak any of those languages in the way that I speak English? I grew up speaking Siloti, and I learned Siloti in my village home, as I did English, as I did Bengali, as I did some other languages that I don't practice. For example, Persian, Urdu, Hindi, and of course, Nagri. Yes? Now, how many of William Radice's contemporaries is a question that is loaded, because William Radice is the pretender to scholarship in Bengali to an extent that the brainwashed Bengalis cite him almost as a sage, as a saint. But Radice doesn't understand even the Tagore that he claims to be an expert on, as well as he claims to be. Now, Yasmin Alibai C has been to the White House and has been part of the list of enlisted criminals enlisted to spy on and make derogatory comments and remarks at the expense of the Muslims of the world. So Alibai Brown is a parasite on various levels. So her piece is headline today: young people will keep this nation's soul alive. Now, that's a given. I mean, young people by definition are going to do something that in that context, in that kind of comparison, older people aren't going to do, because the older people are going to move on to other phases and dimensions. And what does she mean by soul? A soul like hers? A soul which is a soul full of stuffed with treachery and lying and deception and dishonesty and betrayal. These are not accidental things. Her entire career, as I have been saying, which was launched in a significant way to aid the same narrative, the same agenda for which Satan Rushdie was over-exaggerated and promoted in the late 1980s. And Satan Rushdie and Yasmin Alibai C. Yasmin Alibai was only known as Alibai, not with the brown that she carries now. And the fact that she acquired that name, I have to say, is based on factually based on her acquiring the man with that name. And she got hold of him, grabbed him, whatever, away from Marina Salandi, who had a brown at the end of the name, sourced to the same man, the brown. Yasmin Alibai Brown, I have been saying, factually saying, I don't know her, I have never met her, and I have no intention of meeting her. But the point is that she has been deployed as the tool, as a propaganda brainwashing tool, as a point of reference to suit all things anti-Muslim, to suit all things against anti-racists and anti-imperialists. And yet she uses words and phrases from our vocabulary, that is to say, the vocabulary of the campaigners against racism, campaigners against imperialism, and campaigners for justice, universal justice on the highest level of values of universality, transparency, morality, ethics, and so on. Yasmin Ali Brown, to my knowledge, has not come across a name called Mamta Banerjee. Now, Mamta Banerjee is a Brahmin woman in Kolkata, in West Bengal, who has just been kind of setting out her program after the election that her party, Trinamool Congress Party, won against the Hindutva, nationalist, racist, anti-Muslim BJP, fronted by the criminal against humanity, Narendra Modi. Yasmin Ali Brown has not written anything or spoken anything that I can find. If I find anything, then I, of course, shall amend and edit and update accordingly this statement that I've just made. But as I speak, because anyone who is watching this program or who does watch or has been watching knows that I read all the papers that are available. By all the papers, I do refer to the printed papers that are constituted together the name Fleet Street. All the printed papers that are published, including this one, in which Ali Brown is contained or given platforms. Now, Yasmin Ali Brown has praised, as I said before, a man of African origin but through the Caribbean called Benjamin Zephaniah. Now, Zephaniah hasn't got any real substance in his so-called philosophy, but he's the right person, he's the correct type that the Guardian, the likes of the Guardian, can give platform to without having any fear that he would get anywhere near telling the truth about the reality of racism and why he has been celebrated so much by the likes of the Guardian. So Yasmin Ali Brown is a parasite to that kind of platforms and that kind of movement. So when she noticed that Zephaniah has dropped his or returned his so-called gong, she staged one of her own as to fit the type of action that Zephaniah, she was crediting Zephaniah with. Like Yasmin Ali Brown, Zephaniah doesn't know any Asian people. He doesn't know any Muslim people. By that I mean any Muslim or any Asian that would actually put him in context and expose his shallowness, he doesn't want to know. And so therefore he has written books, my goodness, books. No mention of the existence of the real Asian or Muslim perspective of the world, on Britain. And like Yasmin Ali C, Benjamin Zephaniah has not heard of any campaign by people of African and Asian origin in this country against racism. So it's a list of parasites, liars, and stooges that the Guardian kind of peddles and fosters and promotes. By Guardian, I mean to include also the likes of this one, the I newspaper. And the I newspaper today is giving advantage to Angela Raina. Now, going from the parasites to the kind of mainstream, let's say, these are also shallow as the parasites. Angela Rayner is not an original. Politically, intellectually, morally, strategically, and of course, in terms of socialism or alternative. And as I said, I've had dealings with both of these morons, Starmer and Rayner. Now, Starmer, I had first reason, strictly on the evidence, to communicate with and ask him to do the things that he was imposed to do. He was imposed as the Director of Public Prosecution, the DPP. And this criminal, who is a licensed law trader, that is to say, he's licensed to trade as a barrister, is supposed to uphold only the truth and nothing but the truth, isn't he? But he doesn't, and he isn't, he hasn't. And when I communicated to him and communicated to the CPS, the outfit that he was head of, the Crown Prosecution Service, I did that on the evidence that in Tower Hamlets at the time, to my knowledge, a number of criminals were setting out to do crime that is very central to what the movement that I represent has been doing and trying to do, to defend the community in East London and to defend the community from East London. That is international as well as very local, very East London, and very much focused on a particularly identifiable set of people, demography, and the comparative history, and the role, and the status, and the experience, and collective, and so on. And Keir Starmer, I mean, this is something that you will be familiar with, anyone who is watching this, not for the first time, and has been watching my broadcasts. One of my recorded, that is to say, consistent approaches or styles, if you like, or manners, or tactics, if you must, has been to ask searing questions. I don't always do searing questions, but I sometimes do. In fact, when necessary, I do that. As I asked Zulfikar Ali Bhutto during the meeting that he launched, or he was plotting to launch at that meeting, what he hoped would be his political following or party shortly after he was kicked out of the government by then Field Marshal Ayub Khan. So Zulfikar Ali Bhutto came to East Pakistan in the hope that he was going to create a fan base, because Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was given the kind of treatment by the then Pakistan media that most of Fleet Street gives to Boris Johnson. Let's put it, this is the nearest example, I think. And I think it's fair to say that it is factually justifiable. That is what happened. So his image, I never met Bhutto until that time. That image was, I was very familiar with. The image was overhyped, as I could see that he was being overhyped. And I knew that he was extremely contemptuous of the people on whose behalf he said he was speaking, and he was beginning to raise the what later became the Pakistan People's Party. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto had contempt for the ordinary people solely because he was born in a family that owned a lot of land in Larkana in the Sindh province of Pakistan. And that was something uncommon, not just in Pakistan, but anywhere in the world. An aspiring politician or political person didn't come from that kind of background normally. And so that is one. Number two is that he, like so many in the subcontinent, even now, consider that their acquaintance with the, quote, what they call the British education, put them at a higher level as human beings, as members of society, than the ordinary people who didn't have that experience, but were schooled in the local kind of alternatives that were not really seriously alternative, because even now, so many years after my interrogation of Bhutto, the whole of the subcontinent is still mentally subservient and prostrate at the feet of Macaulay, English language and all the rubbish. I'm speaking English, but I'm not English and I don't have to be English. I'm an international human being who must be accepted, assessed, evaluated, and seen and treated as an international human being above anything else. But Macaulay contaminated that concept. And what he said is being followed even now. I mean, it's bizarre, it's ridiculous, but that is what is happening. In the subcontinent, in India, I mean, when I spent some time in Delhi, I noticed how the mainly Brahmin boys, I mean, I stayed at a all boys or all male kind of place. So in the breakfast, that is where I would see the others and they would probably see me, but we never spoke. I never spoke to anyone. I had breakfast every day at the hall that was used for the breakfast for more than a month, and I never spoke to anyone. But I could observe that they were kind of competing. They were vying for the recognition by one another, mutual recognition, as to how enslaved they were to English, what they perceived English norms and whatever. They were Indians. All of them were Indians. But they were away, far away from ordinary Indian people, as far away as they could be. And they probably would be military, quote, officers, commanders, and central government bureaucrats, IPS, and so on, IAS officers. And they had nothing but contempt, and the contemptuous distance from the ordinary Indians. And I witnessed the same in Kolkata. Ordinary people and these aspiring IAS and IPS personnel and whatever, wannabes, never met, never mixed. So when the fascists, Hindutva onslaught assaulters arrived in West Bengal in the last few months to take over the government of the West Bengal from Mamata Banerjee, they assumed that they would do the same as they had done in many other parts, including in Assam. And what I think I haven't checked the contents of the Indian papers to examine whether they represent, whether they recognize what I'm about to say. What Mamata Banerjee has understood about India, I hope that she has understood that beyond the scope of electoral kind of advantage, is that the future of what is now India is at stake. India is going to be fragmented and destroyed. And the only way, or one of the most effective and necessary and ethical and morally necessary way, is to recognize India, the reality of the demography of India, the reality of the history of India, which the BJP is in denial of. The BJP thinks that Muslims don't exist and they've just arrived maybe from the Bay of Bengal, from a ship that arrived there from Arabia, as Amit Shah has been threatening to throw the entire population of Bangladesh into the Bay of Bengal. These criminals and thugs don't deserve a place in public life, full stop. But not only are they occupying some of the most powerful positions in the whole of the republic, or at the expense of the republic, they are destroying the country and they're murdering people, because the unleashing of the current tsunami of the COVID-19 was done by Modi and Shah. They don't care about even Brahmins, even the ordinary Brahmins. They don't care about the lives of the Brahmins. But they're murdering the Brahmins, and they're doing so by reciting and chanting in the name of the Brahmins. So Yasmin Alibai C should have heard of Mamata Banerjee. But there is no sign that she has, not so far. Because Mamata Banerjee is not only the only woman, kind of chief minister and leader of the party in India in that way, in a combination, the mixture of all these roles and the actual work that she has been doing. She is the only woman chief minister, and her kind of confrontation with the criminal against humanity and both criminals, Amit Shah and Modi, that has been a unique battle. And the fact that she has got nearly 3 times as many members of the provincial assembly as the BJP did, but BJP got too many. 77 is too many. Shows that she has understood at least some of the important issues and important ways that she can defend her party and its record, but also set an example for the others in other parts of India. Because by recognizing the Muslims as part of the, at least electoral, in the electoral context, the psephological presence of the Muslims, she has made a beginning. She has not gone anywhere near where she should go by heralding the acceptance of Muslims as ordinary people. Because when I was in Calcutta, I never spoke to a Muslim. I never knew who was a Muslim, except the people that I was kind of in contact with because of the contact I had to make to get there. So those Muslims didn't matter because they were confined to doing their business, running their business or whatever. But they were not part of the wider demographic, wider societal community. And my breakfast in the hotel where I ate my breakfast, particularly for the quality of the food, I didn't know who was a Muslim or who was not. So I spent a considerable amount of time in India, in Calcutta, in Delhi, and in the rural areas, but I didn't come across the treatment of Muslims as ordinary part of the population. But now Mamata Banerjee, so many years later, has been showing now that she recognizes at least the beginning of the treatment of Muslims as equal citizens and members of society. I mean, citizenship, the entirely falsely, artificially created crisis of national registration in Assam and Meghalaya and other places by the Hindu fundamentalists is a problem that has been added as part of the fragmentation of India by the BJP. Now, Mamata Banerjee had to go the opposite way and to begin to introduce Muslims as part of her support base. And the Muslims have overwhelmingly reciprocated, and the Muslim vote has made the difference. If the Muslims hadn't voted in the way that they did vote this time, Mamata Banerjee would not have got as many votes, as many seats as she has got, which is absolutely the right thing to do. The comparison is with the American presidential election of 2020, when the largest mobilization of the people of African American background took place. And that made the difference for Joe Biden. So electorally, as they're entitled to, Muslims are being recognized in West Bengal at least, with the biggest benefit that Mamata Banerjee has got for our party and for our record and our prospects. Because what will happen, there are two ways for India's future, either disintegration or consolidation as a one country, one society. And they say that Nehru made the big noise about India being secular. And all the Nehru's supporters and trumpeters and drummers echoed that without any substance, because Jawaharlal Nehru, created the background and the context for the BJP to appear at all. As I said before, his daughter, Indira Nehru, fronted the most corrupt regime in government in India since 1947. And the fact that she was able to do the corruption on the scales that she did was because India was not a democracy. Although the population has, of course, increased since the time that Indira Nehru was in power, it was still significant. It was still substantial numbers of people in India at the time. So all of these have direct impacts on what is happening here and in the North American and Western European countries about the treatment and the location and the status and the say of the Muslims. Now, why do the Muslims matter? Because, as I said yesterday, what is happening in France, for example, a large number, too many, of the French military have openly challenged Macron to attack the Muslims. They have asked him to physically attack the Muslims. And they have argued that that is because the Muslims are threatening the survival of France itself. That is how serious the cry has been against Muslims by these French military personnel. And there is currently, and has been for the last 10 years, increasingly, phases and phases and phases of the battles and the struggle between the anti-Muslim forces led and fronted by the Le Pens and by others trying to imitate them in the hope that they would get the votes of the anti-Muslims away from them and to their kind of candidacy for power. So although it is not recognized in Britain, not in Fleet Street, the actual role of Muslims is very central in the future, in the debate about the future of France itself, just as it is, as I said, India. Indian papers are still very much anti-Muslim and they deny the existence of Muslims in their coverage. Not only the Indian papers, but also the Indian cinema. For example, this series, this particular, what is called blockbuster, that features as the main lead actors Puneet Rajkumar, the male one, and his female counterpart is played by Radhika Pandit. I mean, absolutely astonishing that whoever did the script could have that offensive, inaccurate, untruthful, totally corrupt and poisonous, tokenist few seconds. When Puneet Rajkumar and Radhika Pandit were sitting in a cafe or restaurant talking as part of that particular script, they were approached, the table was approached. Puneet Rajkumar, in fact, was approached by a man wearing a what looked like a Muslim cap. That is the telltale kind of sign of that person being a Muslim. And he greets Puneet Rajkumar in the Muslim cultural way with a salam, assalamu alaikum. And Puneet Rajkumar answers with a wa alaikum salam. And then the man immediately departs. That took only a few seconds. But as he was leaving, or he had walked a few steps already away from the table, Radhika Pandit, the character played by Radhika Pandit, observed or asked in the same sentence that Puneet Rajkumar was speaking Urdu. Now, Urdu is an Indian language, has been a language from the beginning. And for an actor to even ask that question is astonishing, isn't it? Absolutely astonishing. And she looked at that man, and I have got the frozen frame. I cannot show it now because the other computer is taking long to get charged or be usable. So Radhika Pandit looks very much like she's a British, because earlier during that same film, Puneet Rajkumar comments twice about her appearance. Once about her being white, and therefore any clothes would fit her or make kind of elegant and beautiful, whatever. And another time he said that she was beautiful or good looking. So she looked in the direction of the man that was leaving, as if she was looking at an alien. She was not looking at a fellow Indian or fellow member of the society, because that man was speaking Urdu and he was a Muslim. That is astonishing, unacceptable stupidity and denial and idiocy by the script writers and for the actor, Radhika Pandit, the role she played in that those few seconds. How do they expect the Muslims to behave when they're treated in that way? How do they think the Muslims feel? Think about that. And even in the South Indian cinema, too many Muslim actors, both sexes, both genders, have got hidden names. They don't have the Muslim names. So you don't know, the Muslim ones that you are watching, that they're Muslim. So you have to do extra research into the nomenclature that has become established by the Hindutva-based Bollywood as well as the other cinema centers and cinema industries in India. Many Muslim actors and actresses, many actors and actresses are Muslim, but you cannot tell them. You cannot tell that they are Muslim. What kind of democracy is it? What kind of secularism is it? There is no secularism at all. Never has been. Even Mumtaz, by all accounts, the most beautiful woman that Bollywood ever had, who was born in Delhi, and that was in her name. Her name was changed into Madhubala. Why? Why wasn't her name Mumtaz good enough? Her name was Mumtaz Jahan Dehlevi. I mean, what is wrong with that name or any part of that name? And some of the best actors, male and female in Bollywood and in South cinemas, Tamil, Telugu, and Kannada, all of those languages and cinema production centers have got very, very good and accomplished and capable actors who are Muslim. As I said, but you can't tell most of them because they have got Muslim names which have been replaced. But whatever I'm talking about, Alibai Brown would not be acknowledging or recognizing. She doesn't recognize Muslims. I'm saying it on the record that she is a parasite, the worst kind of parasite, because she doesn't accept that Muslims exist. She doesn't know, she has never met any Muslim from any of the columns or pieces that she has been allowed to write. She makes references to Muslims as if they are situated somewhere so far away that can only be measured by other means, not by ordinary worldly criteria. That is the extent of her denial of Muslims. And by giving her the platform that they have been giving, The Guardian and others independent, the Fleet Street decision makers and commissioners have proven beyond any shadow of a doubt their agenda in a brazen way. They don't recognize any obligation, any duty to have any balance at all. When it comes to Muslims, they can hire and they can deploy a brazen parasite and a denier like Yasmin Ali Baisi, and she can write anything. There is no right of reply, right to correct the heinous lies that she perpetrates. As I said, she is not even talking about France. If she does, then she will be talking against France in the collective way, as Napoleon is demonized. The image of Napoleon is demonized by the British racists and imperialists who brainwash the gullibles and who control the Fleet Street papers and media and the related outlets and platforms. So I talked about Keir Starmer and he failed. And I now talk about Angela Rayner. When this news came, this is Ramadan. This is actually anniversary of what I used as the cause for contacting the Labour Party, Angela Rayner. During the calendar year of 2016, June, it was coincided with the month of Ramadan, 2016 month of Ramadan. The Arabic calendar, the Islamic calendar is different, but I mean, it is easier to communicate if you say 2016 than 14 something, 1444 or 1444 now maybe, 1439 or something. And there was an item in the Independent. And that item was byline to Ted Jory. And it was about the racist murder of Shiblu Raman in Bo E3. And there was a meeting held at the Micro Business Center, Greater X Street, during the month of Ramadan, and I attended. I wasn't contacted by anyone who organized the meeting, but I came to know about it, I think, somehow, and I arrived there. I was not contacted because the organizers included Abbasuddin Elias Halal, and he would not invite me. Not because he was not aware of my existence or my interest in the issues. He understood that there were more than enough interest and so on. But he didn't want to invite me because he saw me as a threat. That if I arrived, then I would not tolerate or accommodate or support his leading the organizing of the event. Now, I never had and never have and never shall have any purpose about upstaging somebody's career. Never. I don't need to. What I do doesn't entail the kind of servile, slavish and stupid things that they do. And Abbasuddin Elias Halal did mostly stupid things in that meeting. And I'm saying this on the record. Let Abbasuddin Halal deny this. This was supposed to be about opposing the racist behavior of the Ian McArdle school head teacher and of Towners Council in giving any space to one of the convicted killers of Shiblu Rahman, Ian Devlin. There was no way that meeting should have had John Biggs present at all. Because Biggs is a racist, and Biggs was a racist, and his behavior about the events that were uncovered in that report, at least, showed that he was a racist. Because when people spoke at the meeting, they didn't speak as campaigners. They spoke as contending with one another for their little spots, whatever the spots were, whether they were talking about the immediate present at the time, where they were located, or they were proposing or planning to plant themselves as potential candidates for council election or whatever. Whatever the reason, these people spoke not as campaigners, let's say. And they couldn't speak as campaigners. And the fact that they were in the positions like Abbasuddin Elias Halal is described as having been a member of the council, a leader of the labor group many times, and the leader of the council as well. That really doesn't go with campaigning, does it? They have the position, they have been councillors, they have been leaders. But that doesn't equate. That is not the same thing as being campaigners. Unless, of course, by campaigners they mean or meant just a word, just an item in the CB to be listed. Campaigners to me, and objectively, a campaign means that you are planning to right an injustice, at least one injustice. And if you want to do that, and if you want to actually get there, then you question and oppose the arguments and the basis of the wrong or the wrongs that has or have been done. To put it very briefly, that meeting ended with a kind of loose declaration that in the following days there was a schedule for a council meeting to be held, and that there would be a petition presentation against the behavior of Ian McArdle's school at that meeting. And it was outside the meeting, after the meeting, it was decided that I would be making the presentation at the council meeting. Again, it was not something I had suggested. It was suggested that I should be the person because I would be making the best presentation, as they said. So when the day came for the meeting, and for me to confirm with the persons that were saying that I should be doing it, I was told that that was not necessary. Why? I was told that John, as they referred to the liar, Biggs, had already agreed what we were demanding. So there is no need. That was another calculated lie by these liars, all of them Bangladeshis, and all of them corrupt and criminally sold out to the racist regime in Tower Hamlets Council, being fronted by their racist liar, John Biggs. So that is the background. So I contacted the Labour Party in Parliament, asking them about the various things that they should have done about the racist behavior of Ian McArdle. And eventually it was in the course of my campaigning communications, I had to address Angela Rayner because she was the incumbent in the post of Shadow Secretary of State in the name of education. Then there was no reply from Angela Rayner. There was no answer, there was no response, there was no communication whatsoever from her or from her on her behalf. Now that is number one, that on a kind of factual basis, Angela Rayner was incommunicado, not in communication. And so I gave up because I had no spare time to spare in pursuing questions addressed to her. Now, looking at her performance as the Shadow Secretary of State in the name of education, it is absolutely clear that Angela Rayner was out of her depth. So when the Guardian runs the piece that it has run today, showing that Rayner has said that Labour Party has been talking down to people for too long, The Guardian is being dishonest, as is the I paper. They saying that advantage Reina. This is complete, absolute insulting stupidity. Because the topic is not about Rayner being sacked or moved sideways by the deadly Starmer. The issue is about the future of the UK. The issue always has been and is for politicians and political kind of post holders and careerists. Their duty, their obligation has been and remains what they offer, what they are doing about the future of the society, future of the country. And doing that, if they did that, would obviously bring to the fore the nitty-gritty, the details of what constitutes government, what constitutes society, and what constitutes the needs of the people. All of that is absent from Fleet Street's coverage of this so-called internal dissent and kind of discontent within the Keir Starmer fronted so-called Labour Party, because the Labour Party is politically dead. That is not in dispute. So we have been on air or online doing this broadcast just under an hour. And we should be going on for a bit more. And then we'll bring this to an end because of the approach of the iftar, the breaking of the fast. And then if there is possibility, we shall be doing another one afterwards, after the necessary prayers. Now, Angela Rayner is being shown as the winner in the first round. That is the I newspaper. It's listing as follows the three items. She has been given a key new role after a power struggle with Starmer, and the show of unity as they attempt to repair damage from Starmer botched reshuffle. And Labour Party should stop patronizing nostalgic attitude to working classes. Blanket says, and remember Blanket. Blanket is another criminal, careerist, opportunist, liar, who has abused his disability, the fact that he's a blind person. The disability is not in any way a license to tell lies, but he has done that. And he has made a whole career out of it. Blanket is one of those criminals who has abused the Labour Party. The Labour Party was founded to do the things that society needed and still does, in fact, increasingly does. And so the Labour Party is under attack from within by the likes of Blanket. And the Labour Party will remain dead. As long as the criminals like Starmer are presented in any way as fit for any post in public life, let alone in the name of the Labour Party or in the name of opposition. And our thesis, our diagnostic evidential finding is that the UK Houses of Parliament is dead itself, or houses, the dead, both of them are dead politically. So the question may arise, so what are we doing talking about them? Of course we are talking politically. We're talking about what British politics should be like and should be to serve society or what remains of society. The fact that the Labour Party has been killed, murdered, politically murdered, is not the end of it. Because there doesn't have to be a Labour Party, or there doesn't have to be a party called Labour Party. Why? Because it's not in the name. It's in the action, it's the activities, it's the behavior and the conduct. If the Labour Party doesn't do the right things, right, not right wing, but right things, meaning correct things, meaning proper things, meaning just and appropriate things, fair things, honest things, accountable things. If it doesn't do those things, then it doesn't have any purpose, any reason to exist in that name. Anyone watching this may think that, well, this is a presentation which doesn't have any background. I mean, the man is sitting in front of wall or what looks like a wall or walls, which don't have any decoration. That is absolutely true. That is intended to be so. For a start, there are two things that are important here. Getting this presentation in a decorated way will take time that I don't have. There simply is not the time to organize any of that. And number two is that is not important to have that decoration behind. Anyone who is interested in watching this must be interested in the substance and must be aware that I am absolutely conscious of what I am saying, that it is unique, world exclusive, because I am one of the very few people on the face of the earth who know about news, and I have been examining a million times the news and society and the rest of it, and there is no such program comparable to this one anywhere. It doesn't matter who the platform is owned and presented and controlled by. No government, semi-government organization does this. Not the United Nations does this. Cannot do this. Because all of those are covered by considerations that this program is not bothered about. Consideration of career and so on. And our program doesn't. We don't accept friend requests, and we don't make any friend requests. And we actively discourage any viewers, numbers mounting. We don't need any viewers. Why? Because in the technology, this program is accessible to more people than any number of viewers data or stats will show. That happens every day, every broadcast. So we don't need the kind of boasting kind of tag. And secondly, the substance will outlast any of the other competitors, whoever there is in competition with us. We're telling the truth that is applicable, relevant, appropriate now, and it will outlast anything going on, because we have been vindicated, full stop, on everything we have said. For example, this thing about Yasmin Alibai Brown and the youth of today keeping the soul of society alive. She has not heard of Shiblu Rahman. Yasmin Ali by C has not heard of Ajmal Ahmad, who was murdered by fellow Bangladeshi youths at the Langdon Park school area, and so on. So this is the diagnosis of parts of the I newspaper today so far. And we go back to some of the Financial Times again. Because the Financial Times picture on the front page today, Tuesday, the 11th of May 2021, has got this picture about, what does it say in the... Yes, the Financial Times says that the militants were attacking the Israeli state. It says militant group Hamas fired rockets into Israel after issuing a deadline to the country to withdraw its forces from the holy site. The Israeli military responded with airstrikes in the Gaza Strip. Now that alone sums up what is going on and sums up the silence of the Fleet Street papers, the BBC and others. Hamas, no matter how severely extreme they are capable of being described as, is no match for a state like Israel. And Israel is always beating them. Every day there are casualties, Palestinian people dying or being violated. It's not some kind of fantasy or second-hand story. It is in the papers. It's in the papers that have bare physical facts that cannot be explained away by them. That's the Financial Times picture. And what that shows about Keir Starmer is that he has got a stooge. I mean, Starmer is a racist, anti-Muslim, anti-Palestinian. So, and he is not sacking Lisa Nandi because he is more than content with her role. Because Nandi is doing exactly what Starmer would expect and what the Fleet Street propagandists against Palestinians would want. And the Labour Party never has been committed to defending the Palestinians, despite the various slogans and indications by individual members of the Labour Party, including Corbyn, over many years before he was even suspected to be a likely candidate for the leadership of the now dead Labour Party. So the founding Labour Party, founding principles of the Labour Party were not, and I repeat, were not to fight racism, to fight imperialism. The founding principles and values of the Labour Party were domestic, more to do with domestic issues and aims and purposes. And as any intelligent and responsible commentator and observer would be able to catch up on this or realize, the founding does not complete the foundation. The founding only begins, and you do the necessary follow-ups and updates as the circumstances, emerging circumstances demand. And the Labour Party did not update, amend to fit the needs of the movement for independence from British Empire. None of the leading Labour Party members in the House of Commons. So I'm widening the scope and the base, the field, so that you can choose and look at the comparisons. None of the members of Parliament that went into the House of Commons since the Labour Party had any members of Parliament during the 20th century. None of them, not a single one, I'm putting this on the record, not a single member of the British Labour Party, members of Parliament carrying the card of the Labour Party, none of them addressed Macaulay, let's say. None of them withdrew what Macaulay said. And similarly, during the 1950s, let's say, the decade after the British left the subcontinent, none of the Labour Party MPs addressed Enoch Powell and his racism. Oh no, I'm not denying that they spewed, that they spoke, but they never addressed, they never really replied and responded, and let alone rebut what key message Powell was peddling. And it became, in the 70s, a reality and truth that the most outspoken, allegedly the most outspoken Labour Party member of Parliament, who was also the most socialist, Tony Benn, became, guess it, an admirer of Enoch Powell, the very racist. And Tony Benn became an admirer of Enoch Powell's views about Europe, the UK's membership of the Common Market, the EEC. And that remained the case until both of them died. Powell respected Tony Benn for opposition to the membership, UK's membership of the EU, as Benn respected Powell for his opposition to UK's membership of the European Union, or its de facto equivalent at the time of reference. Think about that. If Tony Benn was a genuine opponent of racism, he would never, ever go public with admiration of Enoch Powell the way he did, with the contents he did. Because Powell was a fellow traveler with Tony Benn, a fellow traveling defender of, quote, British. That's imperialist British, not socialist, later on socialist British. So we shall be ending this edition, part C, at this point, and we shall be continuing accordingly. Whenever the next edition is.